Welcome to Rick Rack Ruby. I'm Laura Cluvo. Today we're going to make this adorable Beatbox Romper from Ellie and Mac patterns. I've made this many times, many sizes, and it always turns out great. It's fun and easy, so let's get started. The Beatbox Romper is really a fun project. You can cut the front from a panel. This one is Cindy Lou Who, and it has a lot of graphic appeal. I also have a Grinch print, and then I'm gonna go with a red and white stripe like this for some of the accents. But of course, you can also just make it with a regular sweet print. I've made this project quite a few times, and one thing that I've learned is that you can really sew a lot of this on the sewing machine. There are a lot of the steps that just work better with the sewing machine than with the serger. So I have my serger and my sewing machine. They're both threaded up with black thread, although I might break down and switch to white or red whenever I get to the end. But for now, I have black thread, and this is the outer hood. The outer hood and the inner hood are exactly the same shape. And I'm going to stitch around here, just the back of the hood. The lining will be this red and white stripe. And I'm going to stitch around here, the lining and the outside hood. My hood pieces are sewn, and I'm going to place them wrong sides together like this and open up the seam allowance. And then I'm going to pin around this front opening. So this is the front right here. I'm going to baste it again on the sewing machine. Of course, I'm a pinner, so I'm going to pin these layers together. And after I baste this, I'm going to apply this hood band. I'm not doing this exactly the way that the instructions direct you. I kind of do my own thing here. I like the way it turns out. And so if you're following the instructions, you might think, oh, I'm not doing it right or something, but I want to assure you that this will turn out very nicely. Now I have this hood band that I cut from the bottom of my panel, and I'm going to press under about 3/8 of an inch on one edge, on one long edge, like this. My hood band is pressed one long edge, and I'm going to mark the center, right sides together on the edge, the unpressed, the unfolded edge right here, right sides together. So this is the outside of my hood. And then I'm going to pin this. I'm a pinner. If you're not a pinner, that's okay. There's a little bit of stretch or ease to get this to fit right, but when you're done, it's beautiful. So I'm going to pin this around, and then I'll be back. This is all pinned. And now I'm going to do a regular machine stitch with about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to sew the band to the hood. This is all stitched, and then I flip it over, and that folded edge goes to the inside. I have to think about this for a second. I'm going to be stitching from this end, so I want to pin. I'm going to pin from the bottom because I want to see that this folded edge is neat and it's covering all those stitch lines, and that the folded edge is, there's enough of an allowance there that when I top stitch along here, that I'm going to catch that fold. So this is just the way that I do it, and it seems to work out, and it looks really neat on both sides. The seam allowance fills the binding. So if you just wrap right around on the bottom and pin it from the bottom, and then I'm going to top stitch from the top. I have the head of the pin this way so I can easily pull them out from underneath as I sew. So I'm going to continue to fold this over, pin it from the bottom with the heads of the pins this way, and I'll be back. I'm done pinning. I'm just checking to be sure that I haven't, caught the fabric in there anywhere. I'm going to top stitch this now from the front, from the top, from the right side, and I will be about 1/8 of an inch in from this edge, and I'll be pulling the pins out as I go. Here's how it looks. Just a nice, neat little edge stitch, and then underneath it's a little bit wider. But because of the fold, it's going to be just fine. Now later on in the project, we're going to overlap these and baste them. So I'm just going to do it now. I'm going to pin these layers together. I'm not going to baste around the whole bottom edge because when we're applying this to the front of the project, we need to kind of stretch it to fit, so I don't want that basted. But I just want to pin and baste this overlap. What I do is I kind of just overlap it right the width of the binding. There's my hood pinned and basted, and I'm going to set that aside. The next thing we're going to do, this is the front, this is the back, and so I'm working on these leg plackets. This, I made one to match the back and one to match the front. There's a pattern for the interfacing. I'm using this lightweight knit interfacing. I've already ironed it on. The interfacing is a little bit narrower and shorter than the placket piece. Folded it in half and pressed it, and now I'm going to apply it to the bottom, the inseam down here. This is so that you can open up the romper and change a diaper. We're going to do the snaps. This is Rick Rack Ruby, and we can do this. We don't need to take any shortcuts. Applying snaps is actually kind of fun, and I'm going to demonstrate it later on when we get to that part. It's the very last step. It's very satisfying. But right now, I just want to show you that the placket is pretty much exactly the length that you need. There's really no stretching, or not a lot of stretching. But in order to, you do have to kind of straighten it out, if that makes sense, to apply it to the curve, to the U. So I'm going to pin, and then I'm going to baste on the machine, and then I'm going to serge it. I just like that extra step of basting just to make sure that the serger doesn't eat up too much, or the serger doesn't grab a little bit of it. I've had that happen. I just feel a little bit more confident if I baste it first on my machine. So I'm applying it to the front, and then later on it's going to fold back like this, and this will be the snap placket. Right sides together, pin and baste. This is, even though this is the back, we're still doing right sides together. And since this has a print, I like to choose whichever side winds up being right side up. Is that right side up? That's right side up. There's the Grinch, he's right side up. So I'm gonna put this side toward the back of the romper, and I'm going to pin, baste, and serge. I went over to sew, and I realized that I forgot this pro tip. The placket is 2, 3, 4 layers, and it's flat and it's sturdy. This piece right here is the one that might bubble or fold. You might get a little bit. It's such a pain. You don't want that to happen, right? So I just put that one on the top. So as I'm basting, I can, you know, be very careful right here in the center not to let this fold over or catch in my stitches. And also, after this is basted, here this one's basted. See, it's just perfect. When it's basted, then when I go to move over to my serger, I'm not going to cut anything off. I'm just going to serge right next to the edge without cutting. I might cut one thread off, but I'm not going to cut the whole 1/4 inch off. I like to have a pretty big piece here for my snaps. Again, I don't think that's exactly the way the directions go, but it's worked for me. So I will baste this and I will serge and I'll be. So when I serged this, I did take just like this little bit off. You know, you know, your serger works best if it does cut something off. And so I just wanted to show you just this little bit, not the full like 1/4 inch. And I have a nice placket that's remaining for the snaps. Now we're just going to serge these 2 little shoulder seams. Now we're going to attach the hood. We already basted the front, the overlap, and that's going to go right here, right sides together. So this is the outside, which is the right side. That's going to go right here. And then I'm going to mark the back seam is going to hit right here, right at the dip in the back of the neck of the back romper. So this goes over the romper with right sides together, matching the back to the back seam to the dip in the back of the romper back. That's a lot of words. And then the overlap to the dip in the front. By the way, this is a lot of layers right here to sew through, so we want to be really careful there. And then I'm just going to continue to pin the romper front and back to the hood. This is why I didn't baste, because you really need to stretch the hood to fit to the romper. And now I'm going to go over this seam with my serger, which will cut everything off nice and neat and finish it. I really want you to know that I will not start my serging anywhere close to this, this front center, because I don't want my serger to like get stuck and go right there. So I'm going to start maybe right here and get some momentum, and then when I hit this thick spot, I'll just ease right over it in a perfect world. And also I think I can cut this bit off. Look at that. It looks perfect. Even from the inside, it looks pretty good. Next is the sleeves. So we have 2 sleeve pieces, and the sleeves are going to be attached right here from edge to edge. And so with right sides together, I'm going to pin these, mark the center, and pin and serge. The seams line up beautifully with the pattern. There's no stretching or anything required. It just lines up and works out perfectly. And now we're going to sew up the side seams. So I will match up these underarms. It looks like the seam wants to go this way, so I'll probably pin this way, and then pin the cuffs, and then all the way down the leg to here on both sides. I'm going to serge it No basting needed. It's just 2 layers of fabric and they match up perfectly. There's no pulling or stretching to fit, and so I'll just do both sides. It's super easy, and I'll be right back. The side seams are done, and you can really see the shape of the romper now. It's so cute. It's got sort of it's sort of round here at the bottom. I told my daughter it reminds me of a Teletubby. The way it's kind of goes out right here. It's so cute. Anyway, before we add our cuffs, there's an extra step I want to take here. The snap plackets are going to overlap, and they're going to overlap from front over back. So this is the front, and I'm going to overlap it over the back. And so at the edges right here, I'm going to overlap the front over the back, and I'm going to pin and stitch just this little section on my sewing machine. And the same thing here. Just be sure to cross the front over the back. Just overlap the snap placket. And you know, there is the width of the serged seam right there. And so I just set that right on the fold, and that works out pretty well for me. Just like that. And so I'm going to pin and stitch that. The legs are sewn, and now I have these sleeve cuffs and leg cuffs. I'm going to go ahead and switch all my thread to white to sew this. Even though I'm not a perfectionist, in this case I think that would be the smart thing to do. And I just want to explain that the shorter side is actually the top bottom, and the longer side is the side seam. So we're going to sew that together, and then after it's sewn, it gets folded back so that it's a doubled layer for the cuff, and the little hand comes through there, and this gets attached to the end of the sleeve. So I've designed this so that the stripes go around, and the same thing for the leg cuff. This is the top and bottom, and this is the side seam. So we'll sew up the side and then flip it back, and we'll have a little cuff for the leg, and then we'll attach it to the bottom of the pant. I suppose that I could put the cuff right over, but I prefer to put the cuff inside. So I'm going to turn this inside out. And here is my opening. Like that. Be sure your plackets are stacked on top of each other. In fact, I might put a pin there to hold those. And that's right where I want the seam. So the seam for the leg cuff right here where I have this pin is going to go right here. This will be tucked inside. And I don't need a lot of pins for this. I'll just pin the placket, and then maybe the opposite side here. And I'm going to be serging this, and I'm going to serge it from the inside. So I'm going to put it on the bed like this, and sew around this way. So it's just like an inch at a time, just a little bit of serge, and then move it, move it, move it like that. And I'll do both legs, and then I'll come back and show you. There we go. Remember, I have white thread now on the serger. And I'm wondering if I care, whether the second cuff has the exact same amount of red at the bottom. Now the sleeve cuffs are very small, and so I'm going to do this on the machine, on the sewing machine instead of the serger. When you're working, you can do it. I have done it on the serger, but it's just getting a little close to the blade, and I just want to be sure that I don't cut myself. Or anyway, I'm going to do this on the machine. And one other reason is because the seam is so far inside the cuff that you really won't ever see it. And so it doesn't matter if it's just a zigzag seam. I'm going to match up these seams here right here, pin and stitch around with a little zigzag all the way around with white thread. There's my cuff, zigzagged. I'll clean that up a little bit. And I went around twice, and when I'm sewing the cuff on the sewing machine, the presser foot goes inside. So the presser foot sits right in here. That turned out nice. Yeah, right along that white stripe. I don't think I planned it like that. Or I didn't really do anything to make it turn out that way, but it does look pretty good. So now I'll just do the second one the same way. Let's have a look. There's one cuff. There's the other cuff. There's the hood. Cute. And there's the leg cuffs. Now you remember how I told you that we're going to do the snaps and that the snaps are fun and they're not even hard? That's the last step. Here's what we need. This is a tool. I got this at Joann Fabrics. I don't know what it's called, but I'll find it and I'll put it in the supply list. So you just move this little lock out of the way. And then there are these two yellow sort of bumpers. I don't know what they're called. But you want to make sure those are on nice and snug. And also make sure that this little part is screwed on nice and tight. They loosen up because you can replace them with other things. You want to make sure they're nice and tight. And then these little yellow bumpers things are also on. Now, before you even look at the snaps, just make sure that when this closes, that these two yellow bumpers, are they washers maybe? That they come right together. Now there are two sides here and they're different. This side has a cone. I'm going to call it a pyramid, but it's upside down, like an upside down cone or a pyramid that goes down into the tool. So the pyramid is for the prong end of the snap. I got a multi-pack of all these different colors of open ring snaps. I know it's hard to tell, but when I open this up and show you, you'll see. These are the ring type of snaps, and they are, I think, 14 millimeter, or they're size 14. So there are 25 sets of each color, and I'm going to use black. So I have I'm going to do 3 pieces on each one of these plackets. I could do 5 or more, but I just want to get it done and show you. So we have the male part of the snap, and then we have the female part, which is just sort of like a donut. So what I want is for the male parts to be on the underside of the front. Okay, does that make sense? So then the black circle will be on the top of the front, and then the male part will be underneath. All right? So remember the pyramid, the prongs go in the pyramid, but the prongs point up. So those prongs are in there pointing up, and they extend. Can you see how they extend a little bit beyond the edge of the yellow washer? And that will stay there. The bumper holds it in. And so then we're going to put the male part in the other side, which has a little hole there that exactly fits this male piece, and it's flat, completely perfectly flat right there. So when I go across, it's not lifted up. I'm not feeling the little male parts. And I am ready to go with the first one. So let me determine the center. Usually I measure and mark, but for the first one, So I have a silver pencil and I'm going to mark it in the center. That shows up pretty well. In the center, this is why I like to have a nice wide placket. I could even use a bigger snap if I wanted. So remember, the prong is on the top because this is the part that's going to show. Then you just squeeze it together. It's not very hard. And then I have a perfectly round snap, and there is the male on the underside. So the next thing to do is I'm overlapping this onto the bottom, the bottom piece, the bottom placket, and I have determined that this right here is about where I want that second snap. Okay, let's just make sure. Okay, so once again, remember the pyramid is for the prongs. The prongs point up. So when you feel that part, you feel the prongs. And now we're going to do the female part of the snap. There are two sides. One side is flatter, and that side actually goes down. So you can feel the little ridge here of the donut, and you can also feel, if you put it in the wrong way, it just doesn't snap in firmly. You can tell. So now, remember, I want my pronged piece to be on the bottom, and then the female to be on the top. So then I squeeze it. Okay, that worked out pretty well. Perfect. And then voila, we have a snap. See how easy? Now I'm going to kind of measure and mark for the next one. I think I'll actually use a ruler this time. It's about 6 inches, so I'll make this one at about 3 inches. Right here. I'll make a little mark. That's easy to see. Now let's see if you can remember the pyramid, which is an upside down pyramid, gets the prongs. The prongs have to be placed in there securely, but even if you turn it like this, the bumper will hold it in. And then we want the male part on the top, and then that goes down into this side so that it's flat. So there's the prongs and there's the male part. And I'm going to squeeze, boop. And look at that white dot right in the center. Perfect. I'm not going to measure this one with the tape measure. I'm just going to see where the snap is, kind of right on the wheel of the wagon right there. And so once again, the pyramid, the prongs go in the pyramid facing up, and then the female part of the snap goes in the other side with the little ridged part of the donut up. So the pronged piece goes underneath, is that right? Right, the prongs go underneath, and then the donut goes on the top. And just like that, perfect, there is our second snap. I got these snaps from Cam Snaps, K-A-M-S-N-A-P-S, and I will mention that in the supply list. I'm going to do the third one. I don't think you need to watch me do it again, and I'll be back. There we go. There are my 3 beautiful snaps. 1, 2, 3. Thank you for watching my tutorial. If you're enjoying my videos, please like, share, and subscribe.